Hello everyone, it is Wednesday, and that means it's time for another Crack-A-Pack video. In these videos, I open up a pack of whatever the current format is and talk about all the cards in it and from a limited perspective and what I would first pick. Right now that means Ixalan, so we're going to go ahead and open this pack and get to talking about it. Alright, our first common is March of the Damned. Drowned, rather. I always call this March of the Damned. I need to get over that, but that's what I always want to call it. But it's March of the Drowned. It is a solid card, but only if you're in the pirate deck. Basically, if you're in the pirate deck, you probably want one copy of this because it's the exact kind of card that can sort of grind you out a win because you basically get a 2-for-1. You get two pirates, back from your graveyard, and that's nice. Not first pickable, but if you're in a pirate deck, you probably want one of these. Next, we have Nest Robber. This card has gone up a little bit in my estimation as this format has proven to be more and more aggressive, but it's still not great stats for what it is. I am more willing to play it than I used to be, but it's certainly not first pickable, and I think you still probably cut it from your deck like a third of the time. Even in the most aggressive decks, there's just better 2-drops around. Though if you need a 2-drop, you know, it works. Next, we have Shining Aerosaur, which is just a 5-mana 3/4 flying, nothing else. Also not first pickable in the remotest sense, but it's a pretty solid card to have in your, white dinosaur deck, or any white deck, really. It's nice to have it at the top of your curve. It turns out a 3/4 is pretty large stats. Most of the flyers at common and uncommon in this format are just smaller than that. Air Elemental's bigger, of course, but there aren't that many others that are, and it can attack through a lot of them. But still, nowhere near first pickable, though right now I think Shining Aerosaur is probably where I would start. Next, we have Deadeye Tormentor, a 3-mana 2/2 that makes your opponent discard a card when it comes into play, if you have raided that turn. Also a solid card for the pirate deck, but not one you want to first pick. None of these are really pulling us anywhere. I think it's still just the Shining Aerosaur. Next, we have Spiketail Seratops. We continue our cards of mediocrity, really. Basically, all the cards in this pack are things that you'll play, but you're not that excited about, other than really the Shining Aerosaur. And I guess March of the Damned in a pirate deck, but none of these cards are anything you want to first pick. And Spiketail Seratops is also not that. Next, we have Opt, which is an exciting card for Modern, but it's fine and limited, too. It just sort of increases your deck's consistency. Sometimes I'm willing, like if I have 2 Opts, you can basically cut a land, I sort of feel like, just because you're going to see 4 cards with it if you need to, and that's pretty good. But it doesn't belong in all decks. It's probably at its best in Blue-Black Pirates. Blue-Green Merfolk probably doesn't want to be spending mana doing this. They just want to be smashing face, but it's a fine card. All right, now we have a common that is first pickable, though, hopefully there's something better than it, but it is good, and that is Pious Interdiction. This card is very good. Adding 2 mana to Pacifism for the ability to gain 2 life sounds like a lot, and it is, but removal's not as good at common anymore as it used to be. We don't get Pacifism anymore. We get Pious Interdiction, which is a good card. It shuts down the biggest creatures, it shuts down small ones if that's what it needs to do, and the life you gain from it is really good, because usually playing this is already going to swing a race. If you're being aggressive, you make your opponent's biggest creature unable to block, or unable to attack as well, and then you attack into them. You've also gained 2 life, and that is a pretty big swing to a race. It really screws up races. So right now, Pious Interdiction is the clear first pick. Next, we have Crushing Canopy, which is just a great sideboard card even, but you don't want to first pick it. You definitely want one in your sideboard anytime you're playing green. Being able to kill flyers and enchantments is just too good. All right, next we have Unfriendly Fire, another card that I think is reasonably first pickable, but I would take Pious Interdiction over it. It's just clunkier than Pious Interdiction, and yes, it can dome your opponent, but it can't kill everything the way Pious Interdiction does. I realize it doesn't actually kill everything, but it shuts down everything, and Unfriendly Fire doesn't. It is another first pickable common, but Pious Interdiction is just better. Next, we have Sirens Storm Tamer, which is a pretty good uncommon, a 1-mana 1/1 with flying, who you can pay 1 blue for and sacrifice to counter an ability or a spell that targets one of your other creatures. It's nice early. It helps you set up a raid. It helps you just get in for damage early. It's also a pirate, so it holds the cutlass really well. And then the added bonus of being able to counter things is great. And I do think this is first pickable sometimes, but I'm going to take the removal over it. I'm going to take Pious Interdiction. I would probably take Unfriendly Fire over it too, but it's probably third right now in this pack. Next uncommon is Raider's Wake. This one is basically unplayable, I think. It would be nice if you could actually pull this off from time to time. It's kind of a fun build around, but the problem with effects like this, which in this case is that your opponent loses life every time they discard a card, is they're eventually just not going to have cards. And eventually they're not going to be losing life. If you play this early, it can be nice, but it's horrendous from behind. It just doesn't do anything when you're behind. And if if the game is in the latter stages, even if you are ahead, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to do anything. So it's not very good. I don't advise playing it, though, as I mentioned, it does seem like it could be a fun build around. Next, we have Bright Reprisal. This is kind of an interesting pack because this is an uncommon white removal spell, but both of the common removal spells in this pack are way better. Unfriendly Fire and Pious Interdiction are very good. Bright Reprisal just costs too much. It's too situational. Can't kill blockers. It can only kill attackers. And sure, you'll play one in most white decks, but you're not taking it early. You probably don't even want... I mean, if you see one like on the wheel, yeah, you'll take it and play it, but it's just not that good of a removal spell. Drawing a card is nice. It means you get a 2-for-1, technically. But it's just so clunky and so slow. And this format has proven to be fast enough that paying 5 to kill something that's attacking just isn't that good. But you would play it. It's just nothing exciting. Okay. Well, we have... Do we? Okay, for a second I thought I had 2. I do have 2 rares, but I thought 2 were foil for a second there. They're not, though. Our first rare is River's Rebuke, and this is now our first pick. It's incredibly good. Bouncing all of your opponent's stuff. This is a format where you race, by and large, and bouncing all of your opponent's stuff to their hand is going to destroy their chances in a race. They have to recast all of it. They can't attack you with them next turn, and you're smashing into their face with all of your creatures. Our other rare, so River's Rebuke is our first pick now. Our other rare is Conquerors Galleon. It is a very interesting card, a 4-mana 2/10. It's a vehicle, you have to crew 4, but when it attacks, regardless of what happens to it, well, I guess if it dies, regardless of whether it hits your opponent or kills a creature or anything, it transforms, and it transforms... Foil double-face cards are pretty cool looking. It transforms into Conqueror's Foothold, which is just like this amazing utility land that just does like everything. If this were all this card was, if Conqueror's Foothold were all this card was, I think it would be first pickable because it just does so much. It lets you add mana, luckily. Lets you loot for paying 2. It lets you pay 4 to draw a card and lets you pay 6 to return creatures from your graveyard to your hand. This is the kind of card that just grinds you out a win. The problem with the card is that crew 4 is very high, and this format, as I've mentioned, is aggressive, and it's one where you're racing, and tapping 4 of your power to do this isn't going to be worth it most of the time. You'd rather just be attacking your opponent. I do think it's a good card. I do think it's playable, but it's just not, it's not that easy to play. Not every deck's going to want it. In fact, I think most decks won't want it. I think it's probably the second pick in this pack. I would take it over Pious Interdiction or Unfriendly Fire. But our overall #1 pick is a bomb rare. It's just River's Rebuke, one of the biggest bombs in the format. One of the things you're happiest to get in the opening pack in this format. So easy first pick, followed by Conquerors Galleon, our second rare, as well as then by Pious Interdiction and Unfriendly Fire. So in the comments, remember to let me know what you'd first pick, and I'll be back next week with another Crack-A-Pack. And of course tomorrow, if you don't know, I'm sure you do if you're watching this, will be another Ixalan draft video. I post one every Monday and Thursday. Thanks for watching.